Welcome back to Unshakable Belief. Before we begin today's conversation, I want to briefly ground you in why this episode exists and how it fits into what we're holding space for this month. On February 21st, I'm hosting a free event called Rise and Thrive Live. It's a virtual event. It's a space created for women who feel capable but tired, responsible but stretched thin, and ready to grow without burning themselves down in the process. The event is not about motivation or doing more. It's about energy, capacity, and learning how to build lives, leadership, vision from a grounded place. One of the speakers joining me for Rise and Thrive Live is my guest today, Corree Roofener. Corrie's the founder of CR Financial Foundations, and she is also the founder of the nonprofit Fostering the Summit, an organization I am honored to serve with on the board. Her work centers around stability, sustainability, and helping people build foundations that actually hold, especially in seasons of pressure. I want to be clear, this isn't a conversation about money tips or tactics. It's a conversation about capacity and what happens when responsibility is high, margin is thin, and women are trying to grow without self abandonment. If you or someone who wants to expand your life but knows you cannot do it the way you used to, this conversation is going to meet you exactly where you are. Corey, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so
Thanks.
excited to talk to you.
Me too. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
Absolutely. Well, in your work with families and organizations, where do you most often see women carrying more than their share without realizing it?
Well, isn't that a loaded question? I think that women in general carry more than they are that is sustainable in all things in life because we haven't been shown very well how to create systems, create boundaries, create the complete sentence of no from our moms, our grandmas, our aunts, our sisters, our friends. We have lived in a culture, especially women our generation, Monica, of do it all, be it all. We can do anything a man can do, is what I remember hearing when we grew up, right? But that is not the way that we should live a life of alignment because we're not men, we're women.
Absolutely. Now, what do you see that over responsibility costs women?
Well, in my professional life, I feel like it costs them the ability to say no or to say that's just not my way. So when I'm talking about money, right? We live in a culture that says, buy this, get this degree, make this amount of money, go on this vacation, live in this house, live in this neighborhood. But nobody ever says, what is what is it that you dream of? What is it that you want to do in your life? Where do you want to spend your money? And so our values, which I'm sure is something you've spoken about many times, is truly that north star. Our values lead us in the direction of whatever it is, including our money. We live in a world that believes that money is black and white and it's a right way and a wrong way. I truly believe, at least from my experience in coaching and in my bookkeeping practice, that couldn't be further from the truth. We have emotions connected to money. And if we don't begin to understand the reason why we spend the way we do, save or don't save the way we do, earn the way we do, then nothing is ever going to feel right. It's not going to feel like we're living our own life. It's always going to feel off. And that same behavior, that same reflection, it goes into everything we do, whether it's putting ourselves last and never taking care of our health, whether it's being the one that says, I'm just going to make sure everyone gets along. And so my relationships are going to suffer. If it's our spiritual, if it's our financial, if it's our mental health, we consistently don't get clear on what it looks like for us as individuals because we're not a policy. We're not a box. We are so individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in your work, you talk a lot about foundations. What do you think most women misunderstand about what stability looks like before growth?
I love to say that a business without systems is actually just a side hustle. And the reason I say that is because our foundations in business are our systems. Whether that is what you're talking about, your CRM systems, your bookkeeping systems, your email management systems, your creativity. There's so many different things. But we grow before we're ready to grow. And that can mean in life. If you are getting ready to write a book, have you had the conversations with your family? Have you set aside time every day or multiple times a week to do the writing? That is a system. If we do not create a place for us to grow, for us to create, for us to add to that next chapter, then nothing happens.
Yeah, I feel like so many times we rush past that phase of building that strong foundation. And we've built this house of cards that with one emergency or with one thing coming up, all of a sudden the house of cards falls and you can't figure out why. And you keep rebuilding and you keep rebuilding, but the same thing keeps happening. But so many times we see women or just businesses in general start without that good foundation and without having those systems in place that can make their business sustainable.
Right. Absolutely. And I think part of it is that there's so much good intention. And if we're just talking about let's just talk about business growth for a minute. There's so much good intention and there's so much desire to do it the right way. But again, we're looking at other people to tell us how to do it. And it's not that other people can't help us learn. We need to look for teachers, right? Your teachers are actually that next thing. When you find the teacher, you find that next chapter. But we are so focused on everybody else knowing how that we never ask ourselves how. We never say, what is my why? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to save money? Why do I want to spend money? Why do I want to build a business? Why do I want to create a nonprofit, right? Everything we do, there is a why. And if we're not clear on what it means to us as individuals, then it's never going to, one, make sense to us as we go through those growing pains. But two, it's just never going to actually flourish the way it's designed to, it's created to, because we're always doing it somebody else's way. When humans show up authentically, passionately about what they believe in, about what they want to grow, what they want to sell, what they want to offer the world, that's when change happens.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think both of us are entrepreneurs and we've seen this happen in businesses where you see someone building a business and they say that that's what they want, but they can't tell you their why. It's because they feel like this is the expectation of what they're supposed to do, but they don't have a strong why. And then when things get hard, when you're building a business, because like it, almost every week building a business, you should be saying like, "Oh my gosh, is this worth it? Like, what am I doing?" But that why always brings you back. And if that why isn't strong enough, you're not going to sustain that business. And
Right.
it's not that it's wrong or bad. It's just your why wasn't enough for you to put in the extra work and the extra time to keep going, even when it got hard.
Right? You didn't have enough clarity around the why to keep going, right? One of the things I coach on is not only values, but our freedoms. And I talk about our freedom of time, our freedom of money, our freedom of purpose, and our freedom of relationships. And I want people to think about that for a second because everyone's going to immediately have just this thought about what that means. But we all have a different currency in life, right? We all have a different important number one thing. And for some of us, that is money. We need or we want to have a certain amount of money and we have a why around that, right? There is a definite why around that. It's not just a goal. It's not just I'm going to hit this number because statistically you'll hear everyone say they hit the number and they're still unmet, right? They have no idea why that number was so important because they got there and it means nothing. But maybe freedom of money means that I am financially secure enough that I don't have to make this much money. Or maybe it's freedom of time, knowing that you get to only work this many days a week and you get to travel. Maybe it's freedom of relationships with the knowledge that you don't have to because we have so many beliefs around what we have to do, what we should do, that maybe there's this freedom of relationships when you know that if you come up with a client and you guys just don't mesh, you get to say, you know what, this doesn't work. Because a lot of us are so tied to the number in order to pay the bills or create the overflow or the return on investment, all the things that we don't feel like we're free to say, you know what, no, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
is freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I had a conversation with a mentor and she just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and booking more events and booking more speaking gigs. And her husband finally said to her one day, "When is it going to be enough? What number does it have to be in the bank account for you to feel like you are safe and like it's enough?" And she's like, "I had never thought about it that way before. That like that I had tied an amount to to my bank and that I didn't feel safe if that much money wasn't in there. And I was just going to keep going and going and going at the cost of her health, at the cost of, relationships, things like that. And she had to take a step back and really evaluate like, where is this scarcity coming from? Why am I so worried about this? How do you see pressure, especially financial pressure, impact people's clarity and decision making?
Well, I think it comes down to the pressure that we put upon ourselves actually is is because of lack of clarity. It's because we're actually truly living somebody else's financial story. And I want to go back a second here because our values and our beliefs drive our behaviors and our behaviors drive our results, our action and our results, what we're doing, right? And our behaviors, those values and beliefs come from a time in our life when we probably didn't even know what money was, but we noticed when um, our parents started talking about money and it felt very tense. Or maybe money created a sense of lack of safety, or that's what created safety, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was approval. A lot of money is approval, right? Approval from your peers, approval from your parents, approval from your grandparents, your college professors, right? Whatever it is. But when we notice that the tension builds or that we are only given money when we get an accolade, right? Like perfect straight A's or perfect attendance, all those behaviors are actually brought to us before we even understand what our own money story is. But because they're our truth, that's what we knew, that's what our brain formed, we carry them on generation after generation, chapter after chapter, decade after decade. And we never ask, does this actually belong to me? Is this mine or is this somebody else's? And when we do that, we create undue pressure based on somebody else's story. So that's when I talk about clarity. It really comes down to asking yourself, what do you dream about? What do you want? Because when you can actually sit there and specifically say, this is what I want to save money for. And you have to name it, right? Because when we name something, it creates meaning. It has a value then. When we don't name things, it's just a number. It's just a savings account. And I'll tell you, when it's just a savings account, it's really easy to keep dipping into that every month, right?
Yeah.
But when that
Yeah.
savings account says Susie's college education, or it says Kilimanjaro, or it says buy a house, it has meaning to you. And then all of a sudden, the behaviors begin to feed the action, right? Because we have a reason to, we know our why. It means something to us. And so I think that that is where that pressure, that pressure cooker comes from is that we're still living. Maybe it's how we grew up in the neighborhood we grew up, the school we grew up in, and what it meant to be successful. Maybe it's just what our current culture says, right? I mean, how many times, honestly, if you have an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, maybe you know them, maybe they're a relative, maybe they're your own children, and they're like, you know what? I'm not quite ready for school. What does everyone around them say or not say?
it's kind of a mixed bag. A lot of them are like, "Well, no, you should go ahead and do it. You're gonna need that degree later. You can," not many of them will be like, "You know what? If that's what you feel is best for you, then go ahead and do something else until you can decide." They push them to take on that financial obligation.
Financial, but the emotional obligation,
Yeah.
right? And so, and it's not just school. I mean, college is, I think, one of the hugest ones. We just believe you graduate from high school, you go to college. But if a child, and that's what they are, our children, does not understand or have any desire to further their education because of something they feel pulled to, why are we pushing? And it's because it's a cultural norm, right? Same with kiddos that say, you know what, I'm going to take a gap year and travel the world. It's becoming more and more accepted. But I mean, I think about 10 years ago, people would be like, what? What are you doing? You're just wasting your life.
Yeah.
But what they found out about themselves because they intuitively knew that they needed to do something a little bit different created more balance, more freedom, and more security in their life than anything they could have ever done, right? And so I think
Yeah.
it's just that we've got to step outside of what has always been. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it has to always be that way. And if it doesn't, if it isn't saying something to you, you specifically, not your spouse, not your parents, but you, then you have to question that. We have to start relying on ourselves more. Here's another example. I have a car, a Suburban. I love my Suburban, but it's a 2014. So guess what? Or it's 2016. It's 10 years old this year. And it probably needs replaced. And I don't want to replace it. And everyone's like, well,
Right.
why don't you want a new car? And I'm like, because I don't want to spend money on a new car, right? But it's such outside of the norm that I don't drive a brand new vehicle and go in debt to do that. And I want to say, but why should I when I have no debt and that gives me freedom of time or freedom of travel without it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny because same thing, my car is at 2017. I bought it brand new in 2017. It's paid off. And my daughter is like, "Don't you want to trade it in?" And I'm like, "No, like I don't have a car payment. I don't have to learn all the buttons on another car. It doesn't carry any stress for me."
Right.
But I also love what you said about college because my son, neither of my kids wanted to go to college after high school. And that, I really didn't push that. It was very much in my family from a very young age. The thought was put in my head and my sister's head that you have to go to college. Like there's no other option. This is what you have to do. And I saw that come down from generations where my grandfather, who lived in Europe, was wanting to go to college. And then World War II started, and he was not able to attend college. And when he was done with military service at like 21, 22, they said, "You're too old to go to college." And so after he moved here to the States, after my grandparents moved here to the States, they wanted all of their kids to go to college because they had not had that opportunity that had been taken. But my kids were adamant. They were like, we don't want to go to college. And now my daughter, 10 years later, has decided to go back to college. My son is like, I love doing things with my hands, and college isn't going to help me with that. Why should I financially go into debt when that's not something I'm passionate about?
Yeah.
So I love that perception is changing in the kids now and that they feel more comfortable to say no, that's not the right path for me, and that's okay, and that they're able to wait and make that decision and go back to school later if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's funny though, we live in a very rural area and the pressure is still there for my daughter who's a senior this year and she's just not sure of what she wants to do. And there is a lot of outside pressure and not from my husband and I. We are definitely like, you want to work? Great. This is what it's going to look like. You want to travel? Great. This is what it's going to look like. Just, counselors and teachers and just their peers, right? We've got to start asking, but why do we have to do it this way? Why is this the best way for me? And maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And I think that is what the power of change is going to start happening is we start asking ourselves, is this the way that Susie's doing it or is this the way I need to do it? And
Yeah.
that comes down to everything we do, right? It's not just school. It's not just money. I mean, think about our health. Think about, you went on a huge health journey, Monica, and think about how different maybe it looked for you than it looked for someone you know. But
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
but we believe that, well, this is the way they're saying we should do it, so we better do it. And we're just going to keep batting our head up against the wall because it never worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we just attended a big event that our friend Brooke Hemingway hosts every year. And it's funny because talking to women there, so many of them get inspired to start a new business leaving that event. What is the first step a woman who is going, maybe I want to start a business from a financial standpoint? What is some of the first things that they should do to help build that foundation?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, and I've never been asked that. So, congratulations. But I have an answer, but it's not going to be a one size fits all answer. And so, I hope that anyone listening to this understands that. So, the first thing I think you should do if you have a desire to start a business, you have this dream, is get curious and start writing about it. What does it look like? What are your goals? Not just like right now, like big picture. What are your goals? Do you want to create enough money that you can give back? Do you want to make a certain amount of money? What do you want to make it for? What is your why behind that business? Because no matter how structured you are, no matter how set up perfectly you are, again, we're going to go back to that same answer. If you don't know why you're doing the things you're doing, when it gets hard, and it will, you're going to close down. And I mean, you guys, when I mean hard, I don't mean from scarcity. I mean, the first time you have more clients than you can literally deal with in a day, how are you going to deal with that? What are you going to come back to when the exhaustion rolls in and you've got to hire someone, but you barely have enough to hire someone, but you have too many clients? There's a consistent there's a consistent motion, wave. I want to call it a wave, a current of grow and then try to catch up, grow and then try to catch up, because you can't always, one, know what's happening, what's coming, but how do you invest? How do you have your cash flow look in a way before you're growing to support your growth, right? Very few business owners can do that. They've got to grow and then support the growth. And I actually have a fellow bookkeeping firm that I know, and she's wonderful, but she's one of the only humans I've ever known that started a business who hired before she had the clients to hire,
Wow.
right? But it was just what she did. She knew very clearly what she was willing to work and when she was willing. She had a young child at home and she was not going to do the grit. She was going to hire before she needed the help. And it worked for her. But that is not typical, right? And I say this from a very personal perspective. I'm in a huge growth forum right now. I mean, I feel like every week I have a new client. And guess what? I've got to now figure out, okay, where does the hire come in? Where do I support the growth? And that's not always black and white, because for some of us, maybe that's somebody that's actually helping us in the business. But in a lot of times, that is somebody helping support the business while we work in the business, right? So whether that is social media help, whether that is website help, whether that is systems, virtual assistant, there's so many options. And that's why there's not a one size fits all. But what I would say is if you're starting a business is get curious, set it up respectfully, appropriately, and responsibly right from the start. Even if it feels mundane because you're not even making any money, do it right. So that means make sure you have an LLC to protect your business, your personal assets. So an LLC creates the business separate from your personal assets. So if anything ever happened, they couldn't come after your home. Okay. So create an LLC, register it with your state, register it, and get your EIN, your employer identification number. Even if you don't have any desire, you need that for tax purposes. It's setting that foundation. It's opening a separate business banking account and credit card account only for the business. You guys, now you may have to pay those bills with your personal account. That's okay. It still creates clarity in your business. So at the end of the year, if you go to do your taxes, all those expenses that you actually paid for your business are in your business accounts. And when you pay those with a personal account, it's just an owner's equity. So it's just you investing into your business. But everything is clear, separated right from the beginning. An accounting system, even if that's an Excel sheet, do
Right.
something. Don't, we always say, well, someday when I make enough money, then I'll go there. And cannot tell you this time of year how many people need cleanup jobs,
Yeah.
right? They didn't think that they were going to make as much money as they did last year. Now all of a sudden they're scrambling. And here's the thing about accountants and bookkeepers. One, believe it or not, there's a shortage. But two, they're busy this time of year. They
Yeah.
don't have time for all the cleanups. And so those people that are left ready for you to take those on, they may not be the highest quality,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So it's just doing it, even if it seems silly, right from the beginning. Even if everything you make, you withdraw, still do it, right? So it's building that foundational system that creates a professional business because what will support you growing into a professional business.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to change gears
Okay.
and talk about fostering the summit. And can you tell us what this is and what prompted you to build this?
Well, I'll try to keep it small or short, but Fostering the Summit is a nonprofit foundation that my husband and I created to support children before they age out of foster care. So, what most people don't understand about foster care is when a child reaches 18, all but two states, they age out, which means the state is no longer responsible for them and they don't have a permanent home and they do not live with their biological parents. So they are truly homeless in a lot of cases. 22,000 children age out of foster care every single year. And those numbers feed into every other system in our country: homelessness, sex trafficking, mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, the jail system, early pregnancies, all the things, right? And so what we decided, and the reason we decided is we spent 15 years as foster parents in the state of Oregon. And when we moved to our current home, we decided we were done doing traditional foster care, but we knew there was something more. And what came to us is that there was this critical state of emergency around these children who are aging out and that we wanted to do something. And if we can all do something, that's what I say. I always say, we can all do something. And would you do it for one? And the answer was yes, we would do it for one. We would work hard. We would get uncomfortable. We would do things we've never done, like start a nonprofit, in order to change one child's life, one child's belief about hope, belief about what they're worth, right? Because these are the invisible children of our future. And so we started Fostering the Summit. One, the first mission is to bring awareness around these children who are aging out with nowhere to go, no emergency contact, two times as likely to be suffering PTSD as a military veteran, and really create knowledge, right? Just knowledge around it. Two, it was to create a nationwide mentor base so that any child that ever aged out of foster care that contacted the foundation, we could match with a mentor. Because statistics show that if a child ages out with one mentor, one adult mentor that they can call, they can trust, they have a relationship with, it actually more than lessens double the statistics of where they end up, right? So following college, getting a job and holding a job, getting housing and holding housing, having a marriage, children. And Chad and I have visited many, many facilities that have transitional care as part of their facility. And that is one of the things that they have seen there too. They go on to get, whether it's an EMT degree or a nursing degree or a plumbing certificate, they do
Right.
something that holds them in a stable place versus the rocky road of not knowing what's next. And then the third pillar of Fostering the Summit is to create family-based therapeutic group living facilities, starting here in Montana, where we live now on our property. And when I say family-based, what I need people to hear me say is that we all have this thought about a group home, right? 60 beds. No one knows who from each other. It's impersonal, it's cold, and it is very sad. And what I would love to not only create here, but continue to grow through the United States are these facilities that are popping up, and they're therapeutic group homes. So they bring in more than the basics. They bring in treatment for PTSD. They bring in treatment for chronic and acute trauma, abuse. They bring in counselors and specialists. They bring in tutors to catch these kiddos up because most of them are 1 to 2 years behind in school.
Yeah.
They create a foundation, like we were just talking about, of success, whatever success looks like for that kiddo. And so these group homes they require more than state funding, right? The state funding only covers the bare minimum. And that's just state to state, minimum requirements to return home, to stay in a group home, all the things. We want to say it's time to treat our children as more, as better than the bare minimum. And so
Yeah.
that's where Fostering the Summit came from.
And I love the fact that we're not looking at short term solutions. What you're talking about building is long term. I remember a statistic you told me that facilities that are funded by the state, the kids can't stay over a certain amount of time. They have to leave. And to uproot these kids once they've found stability and have gotten into, into a home and started to feel comfortable, then we turn around, we rip them out of there and put them somewhere else. And so that is why, like, having this not be funded by the state, I felt was so important because you're not able to offer that stability for those kids if you're funding it through the state.
So, and I'm going to add to that just because again, that education is a part of this component is that it's a federal law. And the federal law, and you guys, I'm going to come back and say I understand why the law was created, but again, we created a one size fits all law for all kids in foster care, and that does not work. But the federal law says that if you are in a group home, even if it's a therapeutic group home, you can stay 12 consecutive months or 18 months if it's in more than one. And the whole process here, the whole point is that these kids never have stability. They never have consistency. And so they never bond, they never grow, they never begin to heal their trauma because they don't have safety. They don't know what's going to happen next. And so we are only adding to that with this law. Now, let me tell you that if it's wrong, if it's not a great place and they're not showing growth, you're darn right they shouldn't stay. There's no point in making it worse. But when we have these family style group therapeutic homes, we're seeing significant improvements, significant changes because there is bonding. There is understanding what it feels like to actually be in a family for the first time in their lives, right? And the state funding can actually work coherently with this. But what we have to do is we have to create change around the one size fits all. As I've been researching our funding and how we're going to fund this home, I've talked to a lot of state agencies, and there are exceptions. But why should we have to go and fight for an exception if a kid is showing all the key factors of moving through the trauma that has been induced upon them? They didn't choose. They're going to school, they're passing their classes, they're going to therapy, and they're making progress. Why do we then ask or require these homes to say, you know what, we need an exception? Why isn't the exception a part of the policy, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
because these kinds of group homes, you guys, the overhead is insane, right? The two homes that I have visited, both in Oklahoma, one was partially state funded and privately funded, has an overhead of $30,000 a month for 7 beds. That's a lot of money.
A
The
lot.
other home is a private endowment that's been around for over 100 years. The gentleman that started it, created it over 100 years ago, invested money, and it supports itself. And the freedom that they have, and when I say freedom, I mean the statistics that they have is mind blowing. But they have multiple transitional group homes. They actually have an unwed mother's home. They have the traditional family style foster homes. they have a beautiful dynamic that really supports the whole, not just the piece, the whole of the child.
Yeah. I'm excited. It's a new, it's something new that has, we've only been working on for, about a year, but I really excited to see where it goes, especially with the work that I've done previously with foster kids and with the county. So I'm excited to see how it grows.
Me too.
How can people connect with you and follow the work that you are doing?
You know what? I'm excited to say that I just actually launched a new website. And the whole reason is because I'm a multi-passionate woman and I don't believe we should fit ourselves into a box. I don't believe in the whole niching thing. Like I want to be it all. I want to do everything I'm passionate about, what I'm really good at, my strengths and money and coaching and bookkeeping. But I'm passionate about foster care and I'm passionate about helping women grow in retreats. And so CorreeRoofener.com was just dropped 2 weeks ago and it's beautiful. And what's really cool about it is that all of my pages are linked to that one page. So you can just click on Fostering the Summit and go right to that page. You can click to see our financial foundations and go right to that page. It's just me in a nutshell. And I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of it. I had a lot of help. This is not something I did by myself. That was supporting that thing. That's one of those things I know I needed
Right.
support on, right? But CorrieRoofener.com is where you can find out about it all, honestly.
Perfect. We will make sure to put that in the show notes. I want to thank you for this conversation because what you've shared reflects exactly why Rise and Thrive Live exists. It's not to push women into more, but to help them build something that actually holds. Now, if this episode resonated with you, Rise and Thrive Live is going to be on February 21st. It is virtual and it is free to attend. It will offer you space to continue this work and get support. You can register for free using the link in the show notes or my link in bio. Corey, do you have anything that you want to leave us with?
I think what I would say is if you really feel like there's something this year that you want to step into, that you want to go into, I'm going to ask you to reflect on your boundaries, your self worth, and your beliefs and values. When we can do that, those are the why, we can actually create so much momentum and change in our lives that in reflection, when we go back and collect our evidence, we are surprised by, we are shocked by, right? But if you don't understand your own worth, if you can't even see yourself, then how do we expect anybody else to see us?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank
And I
you.
cannot wait for the summit when you can pour into women some more.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.